One. All right, we are live for episode number 4 of the Ohio Outdoors podcast with Jackalope and Jesse. We have a guest tonight, Mr. TripleA88, Alex Anderson. How are you, sir?
I've got like a total of 900 posts in the past 10 years off being, I got 900 posts, but I am an alumni.
That's right.
I kind of feel like I'm an alumni. I'm an alumni. I've been involved in outdoor forums since 2005, man.
That's
So
OG.
before we got started, what were you drinking right there? What are you drinking right there?
Me? American honey.
What is that?
American honey over ice.
I wish I was there with you.
Yeah,
So,
way better than that box
yeah,
wine on your desk there, Alex. So you're not gonna pick it back up now.
It's a Sunday. I gotta work tomorrow. It's a lot more water than
Sure,
don't get me started. Yeah.
So Alex,
yeah,
man, you're an OG. You've been around for a long time.
Yeah. So 2005, man. You've been a member since 2004, haven't you?
That's right.
Back in the old days, I remember. Honestly, like you were such a scriptive writer, and I honestly like you in your stories. I always looked up to you.
Appreciate that.
The story of Deuce, like just mesmerized me, and I'm not trying to be like what I want to call it, oh my god, Jesse Roosh, oh, man, Jesse. But you know, it's just like that story of you and Deuce. I kind of felt like I lived that with me and Pen Pal, the deer I called Pen Pal.
Yeah.
And Joe mentioned that deer on the very first podcast, Joe?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he got some of the details right. He said it was a 30-acre property. It was a 15 acre woodlot.
Right. Yeah. the important details,
15.
right?
Yeah, that 15. And yeah, man. Just being on outdoor forums, I was able to pick up on like the breadcrumbs of what everybody did and what worked for them. And I was able to apply those tactics, and that helped me score that deer. And I told Joe 2 years of hunting that deer, I really don't care to experience that ever again, because it was like, it was a very magical moment when it happened. But 2 years, I had tag soup in 2011, going into 2012. No, it was 2012. I hunted that deer to a very extensive amount, and I hunted that deer like trying to do everything by the deer hunting Bible. When it hit rut, be in your stand as much as you can. Everybody told me, hunt that deer, hunt that deer, hunt that deer. I was hunting tree lines, and Joe said it best on one of the podcasts. And what did you say about up here? It's all tree lines and
it's just fence rows and
parcels. Yeah, fence row. Yeah. And we're not hunting hardwoods, and a lot of it's premature hardwoods where Joe, how would you explain it?
It's just a mix of trash woods, really.
Yeah.
When you do find good woods there, it's mostly all trash woods. It's the what is it? Honeysuckle bush, right? Honeysuckle trees, whatever you want to call them. That second canopy down low. Then you have the locust trees and the poplars and things like that just grow up extremely thick in those little places.
Well, that particular 15-acre property, I think, had one oak tree in it. The rest of it was cherry trees and old cherries, cherry trees and old I think like a bunch
Crab
of
apple.
apple trees, crab apple that were just getting choked out from the honeysuckle.
Yeah.
And there was a few pockets in it, and then there was that, which I showed you, in that northwest corner, if I remember correctly, northwest corner, there was a very slight opening that led out to that tree line, and it led over to what we called Bull Hill. And deer traveled that tree line a bunch. And for, oh my God, I started hunting that property in 2006, and it wasn't until 2012 I got on that deer. And then 2013 I was able to capitalize on everything and get that deer. And but I hunted that deer 2012. I wouldn't hesitate to say that I put 30 sits in on that deer between, I didn't hunt him at all through early season, September going through October, but it wasn't until like rut. And I've got pictures to prove, if I could split screen, I don't have the pictures on this, but if I could split screen, I got pictures of that freaking deer showing up to the camera 15 minutes after I left out of my freaking stand. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about that 15 acres of land.
Yeah.
Man.
And not just once or twice, but consistently, right? I mean, it happened to you numerous times, and you text me, this deer knows I'm there somehow. I don't know how. And
it was just.
I think that was what episode was that? Maybe 2, something like that, Jesse.
I think Alex has made the cut in all 3. So for the good of the listeners, if you've heard the myth,
yeah,
the man, the legend, he's here tonight.
So Alex and I guess we've known each other for how long, Alex? Personally,
10 years. 10 years.
Yeah, about 10 years, and not a whole lot of deer hunting together. I mean, we went on a couple shotgun hunts, things like that. But really, our bread and butter was like once a year we would come together and turkey hunt. That's largely what we did, and that's how I really got to know Alex, not only as a hunter, but as a person. And, we'd typically have the group text going back and forth, and talking during deer season. But when it came turkey season, there was no more messing around. I mean, it was time, and I'm sure the guys on the forum have read the numerous times, and Brock, of course, calls us crazy because, 3 weeks before season, Alex was like, when are we going to start scouting? When are we going to start? And our scouting, our scouting consisted of, we would be up hour and a half before the sun would come up, and we'd be standing out there at daylight listening for a turkey, and we would listen, we'd hear a gobble, we'd kind of mark that bird. Okay, we know there's one here, we know there's one here. And that far before season, a lot of times they would move on us. But once you do that for so many years, it becomes kind of predictable, of where they're going to move. Okay, we know what this bird's doing. And that seems crazy to a lot of people that have a large population of birds, but we didn't. I mean, in Clark County, where we were hunting, I think when we started, Alex, there might have been 14 birds a season shot.
I was going to say, on average, Clark County has anywhere from 11 to 14 birds shot a year.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. And there were some years, 2 or 3 of them were us. And
we held 25% of our tag end. What was that? 2000, one of those years.
County harvest, and
we held a quarter of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's just testament to that scouting, because we used to joke that come opening day, we knew those birds so well that we'd be sitting there and it was over. If we didn't shoot that bird opening morning, Alex was mad. He was I don't know what's going on. Something's not happening right, And then for years there'd be a couple of times where we'd come in opening day and set up on him, and he'd flip the script and something would happen. But it was about a 99% chance we're going to shoot him on morning 2, because we're not going to make that mistake again. And and really hunting those birds in those isolated little pockets. And there'd be a flock here, and then there wouldn't be a bird for another mile, 2 miles, 4 miles. Who knows how far the next group of birds probably were. And we kind of had to be careful a lot too, that we didn't bust them out of there, make them go somewhere that we couldn't hunt them, But we also had to be careful too, a lot of times, and Alex will tell you, we've gone through a lot of lengths to hide the places that we hunt. Just, and we're not superstars, but it's a county where guys don't shoot a bunch of birds. And when you start shooting them, people start taking notice. And so you can't park your truck where you want to park your truck.
Yep.
You know, you can't be seen walking down the road or a farm lane or something like that. You got to keep quiet, because if you don't, you're going to lose it quick.
We had a recent Rural King open up. And if you go back to the gun section, they like the poster child back there, or like whatever you want to call it. You go back there and it's turkey decoys everywhere. So we've never had, we had a Dick's Sporting Goods, and it was open for, we'll say, banned ARs, less than a year. But you go to Rural King, there's turkey calls and turkey decoys everywhere. And there was a time I started hunting this particular piece of area about 2006. I got permission on a cattle farm, 600-acre cattle farm. And the first 2 years I hunted it, there was buku amount of people. And this was before I got to know Joe. And then 2000, I want to say 2008, I killed my first bird out there. And then I ran off to trespassers. And then it was like after that, 2009, 2010 on until I met Joe in 2011. And then Joe killed one in that similar area in 2011. 12, you killed one down there in that swamp. And then, you know, and then we started exploring other areas, because it was great, because, you know, we had open territory, and there'd be days me and Joe would meet up, and then he'd go scout one spot, and I'd drive 2 or 3 miles away and scout another spot. And we were able to work together. And that's why I'm pissed Joe left and moved down Mississippi, because now here I am working, doing all.
Oh yeah, you got to do all the scouting yourself. But I'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, right, for opening around there. We'll do a little hunting together. But yeah, it always used to make me laugh. I can't tell you how many times I've walked down the road in plain clothes, no camo, anything like that, with a fishing pole in my hand. Right?
Oh yeah.
Wasn't going fishing. Yeah. Just walking down the road with fishing poles, and nobody tries to figure out what we're doing. Things like that. I mean, we've walked. Oh goodness, we walked a long ways parking at buddies' houses. I've had my wife drop me off, him and I off in the morning. And you want to talk about a happy wife, is getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go drop you and your buddy off so you can get in the back way, because it's rained and the creek is rose and you can't get across it, you know. Just because you can't park down there, you know. So
that's why I was trying to explain it. Like, if Joe and I could write a book, it'd probably be like, we could direct a movie, and it would be much like Lord of the Rings, where
/ Dumb and Dumber,
like,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Dumb and Dumber, yeah. It'd be like two hobbits starting out at a starting point, and it'd be you know, we got the ring that rules all of Middle Earth, like Lord of the Rings.
It's got a turkey tag.
And then you know, and then you know, 4:30 in the morning. We'll have to go back to this, Joe. Our first turkey hunt back there in that swamp back in 2000.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You remember? Yeah,
it hasn't always been, you know, that great, right? I mean, that was kind of the Dumb and Dumber comment. And what he's talking about is, we had a game plan of, we were going to go kill this bird. So we looked at the Google Maps and figured out how we could get around and where we could cross the creek and stuff. And we got back in there in the dark, and we gave ourselves plenty of time, like an hour and a half before sunup, because we had no idea how to get to this bird. And we started back through this marshy swamp area and started crossing ditches and different stuff. And they're kind of those farm runoff ditches where, you know, you shine your light down in them, and they're about an inch deep of little crystal clear water with a good sandy bottom, right? And then you step off in it and you go plumb up to your hip.
I was gonna say you're
just like that.
You're sinking up to your nuts. Go backtrack a little bit. You know, let's backtrack a little bit. And we're saying, okay, I'm going to compare this to Lord of the Rings. You know, the one, you know, Joe's meeting me up with a Monster, or no, what do you drink? You drink those, what are those energy drinks you drink in the morning? Yeah,
it was typically a monster at that
Okay,
time.
you're meeting me up. So there's this old abandoned railroad bridge that we got to cross. So like it's mixed. It's like, okay, if we got 40 some degree, 30 some degree weather in the morning, and we're going over and we're clicking our lights down, and it's staring me back like it's frosted and it's slick. And then Joe's like, all right, let's cross it. And I'm sitting there like, no. And I'm in the wash business now. So my boots are like real slippery. And I've been spraying bleach all day. So my boots are like slick. And Joe crosses it, and I'm going across like, all right, we'll cross it. But I'm on my hands and knees crossing it. What do you think it is,
Crossing
Joe?
a railroad
75,
trestle.
80. Yes, the railroad trestle. And then, like it'll be like Joe and I, one moment, we're going through this small adventure. And then the next second, we're frolicking in a field full of daisies. Field full of daisies. And Joe finds a patch of morel mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
And he's over there, he's just snatching them up. And then a bird gobbles. And then we got to cross, waist steep water to cross this creek and go over and get to this where this bird is. And it's just, man.
Yeah, I seem to remember that railroad trestle. I skipped right across it, and Alex started to get a little bit of the vertigo, and I pick on him. He's a little handicapped there because heights and stuff like that mess with him. And then that slick railroad trestle, and it was slimy.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting on him on the other end, and I'm looking back, and he's like, come get my gun, so I would go back over there and get his gun, and then zip back over to the end, and I'm waiting on him. And I can't figure out what's taking so long. And I look down, and he's crawling on this railroad trestle, and he's got his headlamp on, and so in the frosty morning of night, I'm looking at this, and it looks like a little train coming down the tracks, and I'm going choo choo,
little hobbit train,
little hobbit train, and that was a good walk, to get to that property. We went through a lot of pain to get to those birds.
Like I said, there was that one year, was it 2011? I shot that Jake, and then like 2011, I shot that. Which one it was? 2011,
or the one you shot in 14?
2011. I keep bringing this back up. I look up on the hill, and it's the last day of turkey season. We were able to hunt the last 6 or 7 hours of turkey season.
I think it was the first year they opened up that hunting all day for the last 2 weeks.
Open up evening. And I'm sitting out there, I've got a fever and a cough. For whatever reason, I always I don't know what it is with, I get whatever sickness, the dandelions and everything. Yeah, the allergies just screw with me. And we left that property and went down, remember? And we heard a hen yelping. And it was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and this was middle of May, and we went down to what we call the Alamo, and then we went down that field, and there was a field full of hens, and then I look up on the hill and I go, "There's birds coming down off the hill," and then I seen I can't tell, a Jake, it looks like a hen, comes down. But he pops his head out behind behind that pine tree, and he had a red head, blue head. But I swear to God, I saw a Tom with a 10-inch beard. That was that year. Year you go. He pops out. That Jake pops out first, and you go, shoot! It's the last day of the season. Shoot! I'm like, all right, poof. And then out behind that one of those trees goes probably the biggest Tom, probably Ohio State's record.
Yeah,
sure. Flies off.
Okay. I was whispering in his ear. I was right behind him on a tree, and And he was like, I'm pretty sure I saw a tom. And I'm like, no, you saw that stupid Jake. And he was like, no, there's a tom. And
Well, he was the
you know,
first
this
one to
Jake's
pop
right in
out.
front of him at 10 yards, you know, and I'm like, shoot. He's waiting and waiting. And then I hear the safety come off and I'm like, I got him now. Shoot.
Yeah.
And he shoots, and as soon as the gun goes off, that bird comes up out of the woods, just a huge beard on him and stuff. But hey, that's part of the fun, right? Yeah, so
it is. That first time I was going back to that first time we tried to that first bird. You killed that one up in that cattle field, 2011. 2012 was that? Yeah, it was 2011. You killed that one up in cattle field, right? And then 2012, we hunted that new spot back there in the swamp, and that was that day we walked down that lane, and we heard a bunch of coons squalling, and then that bird shot gobbled. It was going into the second weekend of season. And we're sitting there on Google Earth. This was before Onyx and everything. And we're like, oh yeah, there's a 12-inch tree leaped out across this creek, and below it is just a whirlwind of water. Like it hit like that one spot where it just like swirled the entire time, and we had to jump that. And then it
was a scene out of the Goonies, right? Remember when he's crossing the log? He was like, look, I have slick shoes. Yeah, it was about that bad. But
we crossed that, and we met up at what, like 4:15 in the morning,
something
and
like that.
We crossed that, and we're like, oh yeah, once we got across that creek, we're in the clear.
Good.
But we didn't realize the amount of damage those beavers did to that swamp. And here I am with a satch, like carrying, I'm going to be a little dramatic and say 50 pounds worth of decoys. And I'm crawling through, and Joe's, I'm crawling through, hands, knees. I look up, my hands are like just mud. Joe, we're just crawling through, and what was that, like 4:45 in the morning that bird gobbled, and we're like 150, maybe 200 yards away from it. And then next thing we know, we started like running through the beaver dam, just
sloshing through
there. We look up. Oh, look, there's a hen and a strutting tom in
he was
tree
15 feet above us, sitting in a tree in the swamp.
Oh,
so we went a little too far on him, but ended up getting him. I think that video's out there, on YouTube too. Nice. But now Jesse, you're in southern Ohio, down where in the big woods and the kind of the good fields. So I'm sure it's a lot different for you. I hunted Benton County for a number of years, never shot a bird down there in the big woods. So I appreciate that type of hunting where a bird has a lot more places to go than, for us, when that bird come out of a tree and he was following hens, we knew he was going to one of two different fields, So if we didn't shoot him in the woods, we knew, all right, I'm going to that field, and that's where we're going to meet up with him. But a little different for you down there.
Yeah. I mean, I've been hunting our farm since 2005. You can have 4 or 5 roost areas on our farm that you can kind of count on every year. But from there, they have 6, 8, 10 different fields that they can get to, depending on which way that, they decide to pitch. So it's always a guessing game. What I've always admired about you guys is the work that you put in on the front end as far as scouting goes. Like Alex said, April 1, getting up at, 4:30 in the morning, going out and listening versus, my lazy ass just gets up and goes out there and waits for the first gobble. And then I try to make an adjustment and get to where I can go. So I get lazy, rely on those 4 or 5 areas where I know they roost within that. I got more ground to hunt there than just our farm. So I got the ability to run and gun a little bit, but if you make one wrong guess out of the 4 or 5 options he's got from that point, then you're just playing catch up all morning.
Right. You're chasing them, and usually chasing them doesn't equal success. I mean, if you keep after it a lot of times, but we always called it getting behind the bird, right? If you're behind him, it's a monumental task in order to get him to come back to you to try to kill him. So there's many a times running through the woods trying to get around front of them, or trying to get kind of where they want to go. But Jesse, I remember you talked about being lazy and just getting out of bed. Didn't you? Weren't you cooking breakfast one morning and saw one out the back window?
Yeah, I killed a really nice bird at my old house while I was frying eggs and bacon, and just managed to slip out the back door while he was cutting through the woods at the back end of effectively the back end of our yard, cutting through the woods, slipping over towards my neighbor's field. At that time, my neighbors had 21 acres with a big 10-acre field, and they loved to strut in that back corner. So I just peeled across and cut him off on the way to the corner of the field. So
got there before he did.
Yep.
And then got back to the house and had bacon and eggs ready.
Yep. Feed the family and celebrate a turkey.
Man, must be nice.
I killed a few good birds there.
I've done that with coyotes out beyond my house, but yeah, I was going to say, me and Joe have ended a hell of a lot of turkey hunts at 7:30 in the morning. Just, a lot of it's just like Joe and I are always like, the first day of season, if that bird is not going to do it within the first 30 minutes of pitching off a roost, just back out and come back. Gone.
Yep. And that's kind of indicative of
we've done it.
Yeah, and that's kind of indicative of hunting those smaller wood blocks, right? Those smaller little areas. You can't push those birds too hard because they're going to bounce out of there. So, there were a lot of times we come up with a game plan, and our strategy was always, early in the morning, we want to get in the woods, and we know about where that bird is going to roost within a group of trees in there somewhere. He's going to be close. And I don't care how dark it is. When you get in the woods at early season, when there's no leaves on the trees, you can look up in the trees and you can see those birds if you get right under them. Just skylight them pretty good, and you can't tell if it's a hen or a tom. And yeah, we've been fooled a couple of times by a squirrel nest or two, right? But I mean, we've set up on a squirrel nest or two, but we would try to get within 50, 60, 70 yards of that bird. You don't want to be a lot closer than that, because gun's good 30, 40 yards, and we try to get the decoys out about there where that bird sitting in that tree can see that decoy sitting down there on the ground, and we kind of back up off of him from there and just start real light calling, just real light, just that early morning, light stuff. It's a hen waking up, and sometimes you get him to gobble, and sometimes he kind of just be lazy and sleep a little extra time. But eventually, once the sun would start coming up, and he'd gobble on his own, or he'd gobble at Alex, or I calling. But from there, it was a tempo game, right? And we're just slowly trying to amp that tempo up. So, call to him a little bit, let him gobble, and then just hold off for a little, a few minutes, and then call a little bit more and see if he answers you real quick, or if you really got to drag it out of him. And if you really got to hound him to get him to gobble, just kind of back off of it a little bit, and a lot of times in those early mornings, that 30-minute, sequence there, when he's up in the tree still, we were trying to just get him fired up. It's early in the morning for him. He's just waking up. But it is breeding season, right? And if he can get with a hen right off the roost, man, he's probably pretty happy about that. So we just keep going and keep going and keep going until he would, you get him gobbling 100 times. I mean, soon as the striker moves on the slate, and he's just hammering it. And one thing, Alex and I really like to do then, and I think we've done every hunt, is once you get them worked up that feverish, is just shut up on him, just completely shut up, and let him start gobbling. Because after a few minutes, he's gotten so accustomed to gobbling back at you that he starts going, where'd she go? Right? This can't be over. Like, I know she's here somewhere. And so he'll gobble, and you just wait on him a minute, and let him gobble again. So you're trying to flip the script. Yeah. And get him all kind of amped up. And a lot of times that would work. I mean, that bird would pitch right out of the tree, hit the ground. If he didn't hit the ground at that decoy, he would hit close and then walk straight in. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know how many birds we shot, Alex, that I'm sure their feet weren't even cold yet from hitting the floor. I mean,
I compare it. Just look at human anatomy. If you go to a bar and this girl's giving you a lot of attention and you're talking to her, and then all of a sudden you just, you vice versa, cut off on them, or the girl cuts off on the dude, they're going to be going, well, why the hell isn't she paying attention to me no more? Right. And then you're going to be, oh, what's going on over here?
Right.
You're gonna go inspect that.
What's that guy got that I don't?
So,
That's
right?
right.
What's going on?
Yes.
What's she seeing him?
They shut up. They go.
Yeah.
They go quiet. And so
And
I've always compared it.
And sometimes there too, Alex, when you're doing that, he's always got a lady friend, and she'll start getting lippy with you and start getting mad. And that's a great opportunity too, when you get the boss hen up in the tree and she starts cutting you off and then, you're going back at her, just mimicking her, cutting her off, just being a butthole, and just screaming at her up there in the tree.
But there's been so many times that we've gone out and called to a bird, and that hen, she'll keep up with you and cut at you and cackle and fly you down, but then she just drags them away.
Oh, of course. You see, because she's got something that we don't. That's an actual turkey, right? I mean, she knows she can sit there and get in a yelling match back and forth and everything else all she wants, but all she's got to do is fly out of that tree, hit the ground right in front of him, and he's going to follow her, so she can win that battle. But
get that DOA.
Yeah, but it just depends on what her prerogative is if she is really mad about that other hen being in there, she's going to come in wanting to fight. She's going to look, and she's going to tow that tom in. Other times she's not going to want confrontation. She's just going to want to breed and get to her nest. And as far as she's concerned that day, that's her tom, and she's going to lead him away. And
there's been so many, and it's weird because I almost feel like that area in 2010, it was so easy to call in hens. Yeah. In 2010, I called a group of 4 hens up, and then they came through the fence line and drug a Jake and a Tom. I smoked the Tom, but for whatever reason here in the past few years, it's been hell, man, calling in hens.
Been hard to call them in.
Just getting them pissed off.
Yeah.
And coming in.
Yeah.
I don't know the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I have some theories, and it's just because the areas that we hunted, small wood blocks with those localized groups of birds. I think, and I'm not a turkey biologist or anything, but I always heard that like mallards and other birds go back typically to the same areas to nest that not only they were born, but where they had success nesting in the past. So it wouldn't be beyond me to believe that those hens that we were messing with for 2 or 3 years there, I can't imagine they lived much longer than that in the wild, but for 2 or 3 years are figuring it out. I think those are the same
hens. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
And I mean, we know it's the same toms, right? I mean, we know it's the same male birds because we would go in there and 1 year we might only have 2 jakes. And then the next year we come back and there's 2 2-year-old birds in there, right? And there may be a bigger boss head tom that had moved in, but by and large, if we came in there and we knew there were, 2 jakes and a tom, and we shot that tom out of there, those 2 jakes would be, 2 2-year-olds the next year. At least one, probably both, would show back up the next year. So my theory is the hens were kind of the same way. They came back to those traditional nesting grounds that were good to them, and they kind of figured out the game, in my opinion. I don't think they have the recollection to understand that, hey, last year, I got in this fight and you blew my boyfriend's beak off, right? I don't think they understand that.
Yeah.
I think they know it means trouble and to not, mess with it. And because we've been busted by a few hens back there too early on. We didn't care about hens, I mean, if a hen pitched out of a tree, and I'm guilty of this, if she got behind me, if we were in between that tom and that hen, I would get up and go run that hen away. I would sneak back and shake my hat at her just to make her fly out of there, get out of there, because I didn't want her going 60 yards off to the edge of that field and start running her mouth and him get towed away. So, maybe we didn't treat them with the respect that we should have. And that's why it's so hard to call.
Well, that tactic worked great. When you said what was it, podcast 2 or 3, that you shot the log, and if you remember, you stood up and blew. The Tom had already flown down, and he was down there full strut down there in that gully. And then there's 2 or 3 hens up in the tree.
Yeah, there's still hens in the tree.
You said you stood up, which was a great game plan, and blew them out, and they flew 100 some yards away. Yeah. And that Tom was just left there
by himself,
cold. Yeah. And then you stood up. I mean,
yeah, that's true. And yeah,
any more perfect.
Remember that. Yeah, there's been so many times. What he's talking about is that Tom that shot down over the hill. And I knew that Tom couldn't see me from where, he was kind of over the rise down on the edge, but I knew these 2 hens were still in the tree right here. So as soon as he was down there doing his thing, I didn't want them, shooting down there to him, because then how long are they going to be putzing around down there, right? So I stood up,
drag them off,
shook my hat at them, right? Of course, they can see me. They took off, but
they weren't very vocal either. They were not vocal, and that's like
just kind of spotted them.
One of the worst. Yeah, they were. That's the worst case scenario, is if you have a Tom down there in front of you gobbling, like he shoots off the tree, but these hens up in the tree over here, Tom's down here on the ground strutting. That's the worst case scenario. These hens aren't talking to you, so 9 times out of 10 they're going to pitch off the opposite way and take that Tom with them.
Yeah.
So if they're not talking back, good luck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, Jesse, one of the things that gave me a headache down there in Benton County all the time was just the sheer number of hens that were in those big woods. It seemed like they just walked everywhere. It was hard to work a bird because there were just hens everywhere in those woods. Is the same kind of where you are? You gotta.
Yeah, I feel like you get in a tug of war a good bit. Bird numbers here are pretty crazy. They've been that way for a long time. I can kind of remember when they became a thing again in the late 80s, but it didn't take long for the numbers to skyrocket. And, it's that way today. I know when they yard up in the wintertime and I get pictures of them, it's nothing to see more than a dozen hens in a picture. And obviously they're not dispersing too terribly far when the spring comes. With the way our farm lays out in the neighboring farm, there's plenty of good patches of timber and big fields that, it creates all of these pockets within let's say a 400 or 500 acre area where each hen kind of feels comfortable in their area. And so if you're a Tom working around, they're working in between all of that. Or if a hen wants to just mosey around, she's got plenty of places that she can go and just, wander about, calling up a storm, trying to find the next lonely Tom in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Are they pretty much down there with you? Are they pretty much roosting together within the same, let's say 5 acres or so?
Yeah.
Or are they kind of spread out, different ridges?
Yeah, no, we see them pretty confined to mainly 1 or 2 ridges that we have what we call the North Ridge, which is a big, long east-west running ridge that's 700-800 yards long with a really pronounced point with some big oak trees on it. That point attracts birds really consistently. Same thing on the southern side of our creek, a little shorter east-west ridge, but another really well-defined point with some big trees. And then actually off the western side of that, you have a kind of almost a tiered hill going down to the creek. And at the bottom of the creek is an open field. So those birds that like to roost on that point can pitch down and work those open shelves, and it's more open timber. So once they pitch straight down to that, they can see a lot of ground on that real open hillside, because it's one of the more open hillsides in the whole area. And so they know whether they need to filter, down to the next flat and around to the north, or if they can practically see clear down to the creek that's 500 yards below. It'll be a little different this year. We're in an early spring again, so that helps me a little bit in terms of cover and getting close to that point. But the years where we have late springs, when they roost on that point, you can't get anywhere close to them. Yeah.
If it's not an hour before daylight type deal, and that's hard on the body. 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, it really starts to drag on you. But
do your birds, Jesse, over there in Southeast Ohio, do they jump ship and roost? Like Joe was talking, we're very fortunate because 9 times out of 10 when Joe and I are roosting birds, they're in the same group of trees every night. We've had a couple properties here out by my way, Joe, where we're chasing them from one grouping of trees, and then we're finding them that last year we were chasing them through two different properties. Jesse,
Yeah. They're roost jumping, basically is what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, like 1 second they're here for 2 or 3 days, and then they locomote over. I don't. How far did those birds move on us last year, Joe?
At least 400 yards.
Half a mile. Half a mile
about
at
400
least.
yards, I think, as a crow flies. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like in a week period, Joe and I were moving a week and a half with these, not a week and a half, a mile and a half with these birds, trying to keep up with them. And luckily I had permission on two different properties where we just kept like moving with them, trying to figure out what the heck they were doing.
Yeah, and it wasn't us. It was just them bouncing around.
Yep.
I mean, do your birds down there in Southeast Ohio do the same thing?
Oh yeah.
Like just one day they're there, next day they're gone.
Yep. No,
Really?
you'll watch them bounce around. Like I said, there's 4 or 5 different areas within the farm that you can count on, and those are around some of our bigger, taller oaks with the open canopies that are nice for them. But and I can think maybe 2 years ago, I had a 7-day stretch where I was out there every morning, and I heard birds roosted in 5 different spots on 80 acres.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if those were exactly the same birds, but I'm pretty sure that they were some of the same birds. And so within a week's period, they just picked 5 different spots on 80 acres. All of them make sense, but good when you're lazy and you don't roost them the night before, it makes it a little more difficult.
No, it makes it really hard, actually, because like he was saying, we're very fortunate in those small wood blocks that we hunted. There was a group of, I wouldn't say oaks, but I think they were sycamores or something that they would roost in. And that's pretty much where they were going to be. They might be 3 trees over, 4 trees over, which to us mattered exactly where we set up, where those birds were going to land at when they pitched out. But the hardest hunts we've been on is like what he was saying, when they start roost jumping. So they were on this property, and then the next day they're over here on this other property. And that makes it hard, because then you're all done up, ready for the prom, and you don't hear a gobble, and we're sitting there at the bottom of a tree and playing the whole game. Okay, we're going to get him woke up, and start talking to him. And then that son of a gun gobbles a whole property away, and it's that bird, because there's only 3 toms in this entire general area, there are 3 birds in this general area. So it's him. So then it comes the mad dash of get everything, thrown back in packs and get ready and hoofing it through the woods to get up there. And that didn't work out all the time, but it makes it hard, man. Makes it hard.
That swamp, I mean, it was always like concrete, golden. They're going to grow. I mean, we've gone in there and shot at them, and then they'd be right back in the same group in the trees.
Killed them. Shot them. Killed them the next day. Yeah.
They're the property that I hunted up in Champaign County. They always roosted on the hillside. Always. There'd be 5 or 6 of them. And then that one property that I hunted, you and I hunted last year, where we found them, it was just they were there, and then they were there for like a day or two. Then the next day, poof, they're on the south end of the property, a mile away or 3/4 mile away. And then luckily I had permission to hunt that more southern property, and then we struck a gobble over there, but he only gobbled like 3 times. And
I remember the bird you're talking about now. Yeah. But it's fun, right? And that's why we love doing it.
That's hunting. That's hunting. That's hunting.
Yeah.
That's hunting.
You take it harder than I do a lot of times.
I can't, man. I've been killing turkey since 2003. So
but I kind of take the Brock philosophy of all the fun without the mess, right? This morning. But the whole way home, Alex is just fuming. Oh, man, dang.
Yeah.
What happened? Talk about it 52 times. Like, we'll just go back in the morning, man, because that's, we talked about that mouthy hen that always leads that tom away, or them roost jumping or doing all of that. But my philosophy has always been, man, time is on our side. That hen is going to get bred. She's going to nest. She's going to be laid out. and she's not going to show up that one morning. She doesn't show up. He's going to be out there lovesick, and that's when he's going to get his water blown off, right? So you know what? Didn't happen this morning, but that's okay, buddy. It's a long season. So
we've missed that time, that gap. I feel like in the past couple of years, we've kind of missed that gap where it's like, okay, they're done breeding hens, but you get that 4 or 5 day period where they're just going to come right into the call.
And that's the thing, Kentucky, right? And that's largely the thing, that sweet spot of where those hens start to trickle off and they've been bred, and he becomes the lonely Tom, right? He's not lonely for long. He's going to stay there a day, 2, maybe 3 days. And a hen may come in, she may have a failed nest, something like that, but by and large, what we have seen is they will go from henned up to it starts to trickle off. And we know, they're not as henned up anymore, to a few days after that bird's gone, completely gone, like disappeared off the face of the earth. And you're standing there going, well, are they done? Like, is it, they finished breeding season? Like, why aren't they gobbling anymore? And our theory, armchair quarterback and standing there in the woods, is that Tom's moved on, just like a buck would if a doe was bred and she was hot. He struck out and he said, I'm going to go find me another group of hens, because maybe there's this one over there that hasn't been bred. She doesn't have a nest or something. And so, yeah, you're right, Alex. I mean, we have missed out on that sweet spot a couple times, and that bird just ghosts. And what's crazy, really, the one thing that has always bothered me about those birds that we hunted, Alex, is they would always show up in the spring after they'd established their pecking order, almost like clockwork. When we would start scouting, there might be a couple hens there, but over the next week or two leading up to beginning of season, they would start showing up. More and more would show up. But one thing that always bothered me about those birds is we knew there would be, on any given year, between hens and toms, 10 to 15 birds total in that area. We never figured out where they spend the winter on any property.
Never. Oh yeah, never.
Haven't seen them during the winter.
You've got that wood block. You got that wood block, and I'm looking at like the outside. Like, now that I got Onyx, I'm like, where do they spend it? I don't know.
I don't know. And funny, it's those birds there in Clark County are kind of shy, right? They don't like getting out in the field where people can see them from a road. We always joked and said, if where you're standing in the field, if you can see a road, and I don't care how far it is, that bird is not really going to be out in that field. There's one exception to that, some birds that were down low, but they didn't stay out there much in the morning. But by and large, every time we hunted a field, they tend to prefer those secluded pockets, those back areas where, they can't see that minivan driving by.
Or they go right out in the middle of a huge ass cornfield, or when you set about in that was it 2017, you went out in that you went way out there. I mean, like 100 something yards.
Right.
Set up out there.
And so that's the field I was talking about, with the exception of that one during the season. They don't like showing themselves. So we never really could figure out during the winter where these birds actually go or where they come from. I have no idea. And you look at Onyx and you're looking at a 5 square mile area and you're like, okay, well, could they be there? And, but Alex or I would know the guys that hunt there, and they never get trail cam pictures of turkeys.
Or deer hunt there, there and say, oh yeah, I just saw 30 or 40 birds. Cause that's
you would think that would happen, but
when they're flocked up like that during the winter, you'd say, oh,
they're somewhere.
The neighbor to the north that hunted where you and I hunted last year, and you passed that one bird. That you
don't pass birds. Don't listen to him. I don't pass birds.
Yeah, you passed one. You passed.
I'm not a proud man when it comes to shooting.
You passed that one, and then the neighbor to the north, he was in a deer stand, and he's like, yeah, I saw like 30 or 40 turkeys over here, man. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
They're not showing up on my trail cameras, but I mean, they hold such a tight spot
allegedly
during the winter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never knew. But your birds, Jesse, you mentioned earlier, they kind of yard up, but do they hold in the same, they stay kind of on that ridge or on that property through the winter? Or
yeah, you see birds pretty consistently all year long. Now they will obviously yard up a little bit, and there's a place that we have called the swamp, which is not a swamp. This is just an isolated area, some of the thickest stuff around. That's about a mile from our farm, and it's probably, I'd say it's 20 acres. It's got a small pocket field inside of it. And I know the guy that hunts that section of the block, and he says he sees the big groups of birds over there in the winter a lot. And, occasionally we'll see them over on us, but it does seem like that once all the excitement's over with for the year and they start to group back up and roll into winter, that they push over towards all that thick stuff over there. And it's all on a hillside, so it's south facing, stays nice and warm. It's got good windbreak in there. It makes sense as to why they would want to hole up in there.
Why they'd be in there. Yeah. Yep. And I've never, I've read a couple articles on turkey habitat improvement, right? Chicory, all that. I think, you guys more so than us probably have a great opportunity if you wanted to do some of that down where you are, to kind of not only improve habitat for deer, but also for turkey. But my observation, not only just food, but, in the time of year when it comes to killing birds, what matters most is nesting locations. My theory is the hens are there to nest because it's a good nesting spot. The toms just get drug along, that they show up because of the hens. But I wonder how that plays out. Maybe we'll have to get a biologist on or something to kind of talk us through. Can you do that? Can you improve deer habitat and turkey habitat at the same time? Are they one and the same? Or are they not? I don't know. But to me, honestly, there's no reason that those birds that we shot for those years were in those swamps. I mean, literally, swamp as in 2 inches of water, always wet, flooded, you got to watch where you step, and you kind of meander your way through dry land as you find vegetation or grass, but it's, I don't know why they were there. I can't imagine they were nesting in that wet, nasty, sloppy stuff. Or maybe that was just where they felt safe. Maybe that was their number one thing. And I don't know.
I feel like the turkey hunting's gotten better on our farm over the years. As a lot of the low growth has come back from, we talked a little bit about this. We've talked about it on the podcast before, but we had a lot of clean brush hogged areas on the farm. And so it was pristine and manicured. And so you don't have a lot of that growth, that hip tall CRP type ground, whereas we've added a dozen acres of that in the last 10 to 15 years. And so I feel like my turkey hunting's gotten much better in the last 5 or 6 years, as a lot of that stuff's really hit maturity and provided some of that nesting cover, which we just didn't have. We had a nice open field and we had some good roost trees, but we were missing that component.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Do you have a lot of greenbrier down in your neck of the woods?
Fair amount.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed hunting in Benton County, as much as was not successful at shooting turkeys down there, I was pretty successful as being able to find them. And I noticed that they always like into those ridges where you come off and there's a big greenbrier patch.
Yep.
They like hanging around in that. And I kind of drew the correlation because that was the only places that I ever saw grouse. Off the side of those hills in those greenbriers. It seemed like every time I'd go to walk through a big greenbrier patch that I didn't want to walk around, I'd blow a grouse out of there or a turkey.
That point I was talking about earlier on the southern side with the tiered hillside, that's the thickest greenbrier around. I've not really thought about those two things coming together till right now, but the back side of that, as if you were to come in from the east side, is super thick greenbrier. And then those roost trees are right on the edge of that greenbrier, to where they can look down the hill where it opens up and see all those flats, see that creek bottom. And then behind them, they've got all that good thick cover that if they want to pitch and feel hidden, there's more than enough there for them to get down into and feel like they've got good cover.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a predation thing. Being briars and stuff like that, if they can get in there, right? If they like them for the same reason rabbits like them.
Yeah.
They can get in there and feel a little safer. They know they can't be bushwhacked.
Right.
That swamp we hunt though, Joe, how many times have we driven by? I mean, each evening or each morning, they're in that swamp. We know they're in that swamp.
Yeah.
What do you think keeps them there? There's no, I mean, what kind of vegetation? There's black water, creeks,
bugs.
and
I don't know.
swamp. Bugs? You think bugs?
Bugs,
I mean,
earthworms.
there's been.
I have no idea what keeps those birds in that nasty swamp. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really know, Alex. I've thought about that a lot of times. Besides food, there's not a lot of good nesting cover in there for them.
Right.
If it rains really hard, the creek comes over the banks and it would wash out any nest that's in there. So
Yep.
I can't imagine reason why they would be in there besides it's nasty, and in farm country, the only places that haven't been cut down is nasty places,
Right.
So being soupy nasty, there's big sycamores in there. There are some big oaks in there. So good roost trees as compared to that, crappy, black locust and cherry trees and other things like that. But I don't know. I think, poor old struggling birds trying to survive. Right?
Yeah.
So,
What was that? There's one patch over there that has a bunch of flowers, and I don't know if they eat the tops off, like the seeds or something. But other than that, I mean, like, there's been times where we go back there, we'll see them down that lane, and we'll stop and look, put binoculars on them, full fan, and then 20 minutes later, they're off of it,
They're
and
gone.
we know that they flew the creek, and then we come around to the opposite side, they're not there.
Yeah.
What are they doing back there in that woods? What's back there?
I don't know.
I mean, the
scratching up
swamp
some
and-
earthworms in the mud, I guess. I don't know.
I guess.
That was
think
another
they,
thing. Yeah, we did when we got up and went scouting those early morning. We go listen to those birds, roost and wake up in the morning and figure out where they're at, and then we go get back in the truck, go home, get ready for work, all that kind of stuff. And then at the time I was driving to Columbus, well, I would drive around that property 2 or 3 times every morning just to see if they came out in the field or if they were down that lane or somewhere else, just to kind of figure out, okay, we know where they were roosted at. Now, what are they doing once they hit the ground, trying to catch them? But yeah, we had it down to a science there for a while. The past 2 years kind of kicked our butt out there.
Well, there's been years that they came out into that cornfield and we busted them out in that cornfield.
Yeah, there's been a few years.
Travis killed 2 out there?
2 out there. Yeah.
No,
It's hard to see all the way across that field in that back corner though, especially early in the morning. But hard to see.
But some
years,
yeah.
So,
It's just weird how they some years they're utilizing that cornfield, and other years you just know they're there. We go back there and listen to them, and we're like, what are they doing back there?
Yeah. What are you saying, Jesse?
I was going to say we're getting near on our time. You kind of touched on a little bit one of the tactics that I think people can take to the bank in terms of once he starts trying to get you to talk to him, be quiet. Any other parting bits of wisdom that the aspiring turkey hunters can take to the woods with them this spring?
No.
Well, I think probably we're going to come from different ends of the spectrum on that one. Alex and I mentioned previously, that's kind of how he and I think one of the reasons we hunt so well together is I am very much a go, make it happen, crap or get off the pot type. We got to move on these birds right now. And I think Alex is a little more reserved.
I taught him that, by the way. I taught him that. 2011. No, it was 2011. I took him. We sat up on a bird, and this bird just kept gobbling up on the roost. And then I whispered over to Joe and I said, "I'm just going to shut up on him because he knows we're here. What's the point of what? Like, why am I going to keep calling to this bird if he's just going to keep calling or gobbling to me?"
Yep.
And what he triple gobble. Like it sounded like a gobble.
He was choking on
top
himself.
of a gobble, and then he was choking on that third gobble, and that really educated Joe and I a lot. And we've utilized that technique ever since then, a couple times. But that bird was lonely. He didn't have any hens with him.
Yep. Yeah.
And that worked. That was bon appetit for that situation. If you got a bird gobbling to you and he sounds hot, just shut up on him. That's all I gotta say.
Yep.
I
mean, just
it's hard to do.
Be quiet on them.
It's hard to do.
It is really hard to do. I mean, like if you're cutting at him and he continues to gobble, it's hard not to call. But you've got to test his patience and see if he. How would you explain it, Joe? Just that hopefully he doesn't have a hen with him.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate because
we would shut up on him,
we'd walked under that bird and seen him up in the tree, but we didn't see any other blobs up there. Like there was no hens with him.
Yeah, being quiet on them is kind of hard. And we'll throw a locator at him every once in a while just to see, are they coming towards us? Is he coming towards us or not? But just don't hammer him anymore. Yeah, that's hard. And if it doesn't work out, and if he starts to go away from you, usually, I mean, it's less than a minute where you have to make a decision. All right, am I going to move on this bird? Can I get around him or not? Am I going to push him hard and go?
Well,
get up and go.
Well, it just, not necessarily like, Joe's the type, crap, or get off the pot. Let's go. Get in front of this bird. But there's been so many times that we've sat back and gone, all right, let's come back. Let's come back.
Yeah, many times. But if the situation warrants it, I will straight last to the Mohicans across a field, guns blazing. If I think I can run up on you close enough and fire a shot, you're gonna get it, buddy.
We've killed a lot of birds coming back the next morning and just going, that's where he wants to go. So let's get out in front of him. So we'll resituate ourselves and say, hey, we learned from the morning before and said he pitched the roost this way. Let's get over to this area where he likes to go, and we're at Bob Evans by 7:30, man.
Steak and eggs, baby.
Steak and eggs. So Jesse, same for you, bud. I mean, you've said a couple of times that you never really got serious into turkey hunting, but you learned a lot along the way and killed some nice birds too. And really, what's been interesting? What's been the lesson learned or hard lesson learned for you, if you will?
You have to hunt turkeys the way they have to be hunted, not the way you want to hunt them. And I say that to say that I'm impatient and that I had expectations of just being able to go out in the woods that I knew and kind of knew where kind of birds wanted to be. But if you're impatient and you call too much, it really doesn't matter whether the birds are there. You're going to screw things up. And I've screwed a lot of hunts up just by, being impatient, getting lazy after you've been on point, you've been quiet, you've been sitting still, and then you let your guard down and you get busted moving. It takes, I think, attention to detail from the minute that you get into the woods until the minute you get back to the truck. And if you're paying attention to what you're doing the entire time, you're going to be much more successful. And there were a lot of times in there where I was just as lazy while I was hunting as I was with my pre-hunt scouting, right? I was just fidgeting around and not trying to think about where are the weaknesses in my setup. How long's it been since I've seen that bird? Do I really need to move right now? 15 minutes is not that long in terms of a bird going quiet. And I've had to really just, buckle down and be patient and change the way that I hunt birds, because it's not necessarily the most fun way for me. I'm with you, run and gun and let it rip, but that wasn't a very successful tactic for me. So over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been much more patient. I've called way less, and I've killed, a turkey every year since then.
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny, even knowing that, you'll still make that mistake, right? I mean, twice last year, Alex, that burned us, that we moved on a bird, followed him like we shouldn't have. And 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, he's back exactly where we were sitting.
Yeah.
So, if we'd have just been a little more patient and sat there, we probably killed that bird.
But
you know what? I'm not going to give that bird that satisfaction. I'm going to say if I would have sat right there, he never came back.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I hunted Kentucky. I hunted Kentucky last year, and luckily I bought my license before the whole COVID stuff. And it was like 3:00 in the afternoon. I had just got back, took my boots off, put all my clothes on. I'm going to get carry out down the street. I had to wear my COVID mask, and I'm getting ready to leave. And no kidding, like I left the woods at like 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was 3 o'clock. That bird was there was a bird gobbling down the ravine, up in the grass field, just where I left. Like he knew I was there.
Yep. Just waited for you to leave.
Yeah. So Joe and I, we could probably be a little more patient, but at the same time, you know, we're hunting through the weekday, and Joe's got to be at work at like 9-10 o'clock, and I got to be at work, and you know, we're trying to get it done by like 7:30, man. 7:30.
Yep.
That's me and Joe's. You know.
Yep.
Have we ever killed, besides that bird I killed in 2018? Have we ever killed a bird past 9:30, 10 o'clock? I mean, you killed that one up in up north. We hunted that woods all day. But have we ever killed a bird like just, you know, just sitting and waiting?
Yeah, that was still
9:30,
9:45 in the morning, but no, I don't think so.
Yeah,
not really. It's usually first in the morning or we're gone, you know.
Well, those two that we killed last year were what, like 11 or 10:30?
That was Kentucky, though. They
That
snuck
was,
up on us.
that was a freak chance.
Yeah, right.
I
That was a
don't
little more of an
know.
ambush than anything.
Yeah.
I was trying to take a nap. They interrupted me, so I shot them.
Hey, well, you know, that's what you get.
Yeah, we did. We doubled up that day. Didn't we?
Joe was on an oak tree looking downhill, and I'm looking over towards a pond, and I just happened to be like playing around on my phone. I looked up, Joe, Strutter. And Joe looks at me and he smiled at me, and I'm like, why are you smiling at me?
I'm not falling for that. I just got comfy.
Strutter. I'm like, stand up, get on your knees. Yeah.
And I'm looking at him like, no, dude, I'm not ending up on YouTube. You're all freaking me out. Like, you know,
Like I'm taking
good times.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we have merely scratched the surface of the turkey talk that could come from this trio. So we'll have to bring it back around another day, and we'll dig into all the ins and outs of the turkey hunting. Alex, I appreciate you joining us tonight, man.
Appreciate it. I got plenty of deer stories too. Got plenty of deer stories.
I knew you'd never pick up that box of wine again on camera after I mentioned it, huh? Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I don't care.
All right.
Bottoms up. That might be our
be
our first podcast sponsor. Is some self-serve boxed wine. So
God, please no.
Black box. I don't care.
We at least try for a decent whiskey.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Had fun, guys.
All right. If you're listening to us and you haven't joined the forum yet, theohiooutdoors.com. You can also find us at The Ohio Outdoors on Facebook and Instagram. And the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcast platforms. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.